Welcome back to Hardball. We all remember these pictures. Detainees in hoods, shackled in painful stress positions, piled naked or with a leash around their necks like dogs. It was followed by outrage about the mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners by American forces in the Abu Ghraib prison. It was a story that demanded answers and especially someone to bear responsibility, like on the cover here of The Economist magazine in 2004. But now the only Army officer to face a court-martial for the Abu Ghraib case was cleared of the charges against him by a military jury the other day, ending a series of prosecutions that stretched over more than 3 years. So the question remains, who's to blame for the Abu Ghraib scandal? And was the scandal at Abu Ghraib a result of the Bush administration's policy? That's the Hardball debate tonight. Frank Gaffney's a former Defense Department official in the Reagan administration. He's now with the Center for Security Policy. And Jon Soltz is an Iraq War veteran, now with an organization called VoteVets.org. It's your argument, Jon Soltz. This came from the top, right? Or where did it come from? What? All this behavior, all these hoods, all these leashes, all this odd, almost sexual misbehavior, humiliating prisoners for worldwide television. Whose fault is it?
Well, there's a couple issues with Abu Ghraib. Obviously, we didn't go with enough forces. The soldiers in Abu Ghraib were military policemen, but they weren't trained in detainee operations. They were conflicted with their command. Obviously, there was contractors that were involved, and some of the soldiers were confused. So there's that issue. But this is about a much larger issue of this administration. George Bush in 2002, against the willingness of his Secretary of State Colin Powell, decided that he wasn't going to support the Geneva Conventions in use to people that were captured in the War on Terror. Later, that same rule followed into Iraq with foreign fighters. Then you have Alberto Gonzales, who gives us a very limited, idea in his memorandum of what torture really is. And then Donald Rumsfeld exploits that memorandum and comes up with these, techniques, these torture techniques, or enhanced torture techniques, or enhanced interrogation techniques, and all of this has slipped all the way through. I mean, our soldiers know the first day they go to basic training that we believe in the Geneva Convention, and anything less than that undermines the morality of our troops in the field, and it undermines their authority in combat, and it's been detrimental to the armed forces, no question about it.
Your response?
I believe that the persistence of the attention given to what clearly was a low-level gang of very perverted people behaving in a despicable fashion, not for the television cameras, for their own amusement, that were splashed over the cameras. And the fact that, frankly, we're having this discussion now is revolting to me. We've got people who are determined to destroy this country, Chris, some of whom are violating every rule of the Geneva Convention. And this notion that only by giving them all of the protections of the Geneva Convention will we be conducting ourselves in a moral fashion, I think is ridiculous. The truth of the matter is, Don Rumsfeld didn't have anything to do with Abu Ghraib. I don't think the president, Dick Cheney, any of the boogeymen that people would like to have somehow implicated or prosecuted for Abu Ghraib had anything to do with it, had any knowledge of it. And more to the point, the fact that we persist
not Jeff Miller, not Cambone, none of the civilians at the top of the,
in trying to find somebody like that to blame for this is an abomination.
John, your thoughts on this? Are we stirring up trouble for America by bringing attention to this issue?
Our soldiers are in combat every day in Iraq. They're trying to convince the Iraqis they're there to support them, that they're there to win their hearts and minds. When your President of the United States stands up and says we have moral authority, but then revokes the use of the Geneva Convention in combat, he's undermined the morality of every soldier who's volunteered to serve our country. Our officers in the military are against this administration on the issue. Colin Powell is against the administration on this issue. Senator McCain, Senator Graham are against the administration on this issue. Our soldiers need that moral authority in combat to defeat the enemy. Anything less is undermining their mission in combat, and it's disgraceful to the soldiers who are serving there now.
Look, every one of those soldiers, I think, understands that if you start giving protections to people who don't wear uniforms, who hide themselves among civilian populations, who don't have chains of command, you are in effect actually making civilians more at risk. That is precisely.
We are the United States of America.
Just a second.
We are the United States of America.
Chris,
in the military, we protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America.
Let Frank finish his thoughts, then you react, John, please.
We are a country of laws. But when you start applying the laws to people who do not earn their application, you debase the law. That is what is, I think, at the crux of this debate.
What are the limits?
The limits are that they are not entitled to prisoner of war status. They are not entitled to the limits.
Treatment of them?
You treat them in a humane way. You treat them in a way that is consistent with our own standards, but you do not confer upon them either the entire protections of our constitutional rights.
Let me get focused in this debate. I want to tighten this up here. Jon Soltz, let me ask you this. Do you have evidence that the behavior of these enlisted people and non-commissioned officers, the people that were engaged in stacking these people up like hot dogs and humiliating them sexually and putting dog collars on them, and in effect, whether intentionally or not, creating pictures which have gone around the billion-person Islamic world and caused hatred of this country and has become a recruiting poster for the war against us in this war of terrorism, do you believe that this came from civilians at the top, involved at Gitmo and brought this over to use over there, and this was a policy, or it was a corrupting result of just people with too much time on their hands and not enough direction?
It's both, because you have an administration that loosened the concept of us supporting the Geneva Convention. In combat, these interrogation techniques are used to get what we call human intelligence, what we rely on in combat, actionable intelligence. And when you use these interrogation techniques that are in violation of the Geneva Convention, like dog barking, making people stay up, that's not good intelligence. That's not actionable intelligence that helps us in the ground. And so here we are every day in Iraq in combat trying to win over the hearts and minds of these people.
Do you have evidence that this came from civilians in the Pentagon?
Absolutely. I mean, the President of the United States said we're not going to support the Geneva Convention. Secretary Rumsfeld released a memo that said that there's 24 enhanced interrogation techniques that are going to be used in Abu Ghraib. These contractors brought this to Iraq. It's ridiculous.
Please, let me give Frank the last word here.
The short answer to your question is no. He doesn't have evidence. He's imputing to what he claims to be the source of all evil something that did not actually have an impact in Abu Ghraib. And more to the point, it would be actually corrosive to our position vis-a-vis these terrorists to give them the treatment that he apparently thinks they ought to have.
I care about our American men and women in combat. I care about our men and women in combat,
too.
That's what I care about.
And
I want them to have the moral authority.
As you would have them treated, I'm
afraid. See, I've been in combat and you haven't. In the first Gulf War, they surrendered to us. The enemy surrenders to us in combat because they know we treat them humanely. It's a force multiplier for our troops.
Thank you very much, Frank Gaffney. Thank you, Jon Soltz. Up next, the round. And by the way, I picked this topic not to hurt America, because I feel if we let this go, the world will see us saluting it. If somebody's not punished with authority here, the world will say we hid this problem, and I don't think we should.
Unless the problem has been properly identified and properly addressed.
I have never heard of enlisted men being so original in policy making. Anyway, thank you.
Sick bunch of kids.
A round table on Bush's bad week.